kata in the bookstore. If you're not able to be here at that time, it's perfectly appropriate to make an offering to her, offer a kata to her at the end of the teachings anytime. So when we break for lunch or at the end of the day today, if you wanted to make an offering to her, you can. And I can show you how to do it if you don't know how to do that. And I think I've probably forgotten something, but that's everything I've got written in my notes, and we expect her any moment. So thanks for being here. I knew there was something else. We're going to do a group photo at the end of the morning teachings today. So when we break for lunch, we want to all come up and we'll gather around Venerable Robina, and David Strevel will take a photo of us. So be ready for that. Be ready to spring into action.
Sijinam kaji nye getsenki, deng di Shishok, Janu Dune So I'm very sorry. I misinterpreted. The worst place in the whole world for me, who's coming in late, not being rude, was Mexico. I mean, we had the public talk at 7 o'clock, and then 10 past 7, 20 past 7, people walking in, 7:30, 8, 8 o'clock, 8:30. It was very interesting. I suppose you're allowed to come in for 15 minutes if you want to. There's no law that you can't. Okay. So today, lunch at noon. Okay. Return at 1:30. End 4. All right, we better make the most of it. We've only got 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4.5 hours. So I'm going to have to talk fast. I'll do my best. I always quote this. I know it's so boring if you heard it before. But it's 30 years ago when I was living in Queensland, and we have a nunnery there at Chen Raising Institute. And it's 100 kilometres from Brisbane, which is the main city in Queensland. So I was based at the nunnery, and so the Queensland Centre, Miffy, she invited 3 of us nuns to give a 90-minute talk one each Tuesday, you know. So she transcribed them. And the other 2 nuns of 8 pages, and mine were 24. So it's literally 3 times the pace. I mean, that is funny, you've got to admit. But I'm not the good example of a Buddhist. When people think Buddhists talk slowly and walk slowly. Now I walk slowly, my knee, but still the mouth keeps going. Well, as the Chinese, I mean, I had some acupuncture yesterday, Elise, and she said it's like, and all the Chinese tell me that, you got to bring the heat down, they say. You got to bring the heat down. And it was so nice the way she said, you got to bring, the moment your heat is above the pot, you got to bring it below the pot. It was a very nice way of putting it. Maybe by the time I'm dead, I'll be successful. Okay. All right. So we just think we're here to listen to, think about, analyze, interpret, analyze, internalize, you know, Buddha's worldview, basically. We're going to try and hear the whole worldview. Briefly speaking, a brief summary of the view of Buddhism about the universe. That's literally what Buddhism is, actually. What's studied in the monastic university system in Tibet, coming from the great systems in India. Of course, everybody who's a Buddhist doesn't have to know that. You can be a 1% Buddhist. I'm not kidding. You can do the mindfulness meditation taught by the Buddha if you want to and know more. You can choose what you like. But I like the big view. I find that extremely interesting, you know. Trying to join all the dots, see the logic, see the internal logic of all the different pieces, you know. I find that very helpful. So I'll just do my best to try and present that based upon this structure that we know about, 14th century, our 14th century lineage Lama Tsongkhapa, our patron saint, if you like, his way of presenting the Buddhist teachings, based upon the 11th century Atisha, based upon the 5th century, 7th century, blah, 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 going back, the lineage, back. They pay enormous respect to the oral lineage, you know. So we're going to think and to listen, think about it. I'm listening and thinking about it every time, honestly, sincerely. There's no question about that. To see if there's anything we can take from it as practical tools to use in our lives to help us, 1, develop our own amazing potential, and 2, on the basis of which to help others. That's the essence. That's it. That's the purpose of all of it. And if there's a single word, single comma, single phrase, single sentence in Buddhist philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, everything else that doesn't help us do that, it's a load of rubbish and chuck it out. And that's not kidding. It's really important to be very rigorous in that way and understanding, you know. So that's up for us to look at and check out and think about. So with this attitude in mind, our little prayer will express that. Well, the first 2 lines express, for those of us who are already Buddhists, it reiterates our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and the second 2 lines are expressing this altruistic motivation. We're going to listen to these teachings so we can develop ourselves, so we can help others. Speaking very simply. If you know it, sing it in Tibetan. If you've got your prayer book, whatever you like. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog sangye charang Chang Tsoke Chog Nam La, Chang Cho Badu Dagni Kyab Suchi, Dagi Chernyen Gipes Sonam Ki, Drola Penchir Sange Drupa Shog. So now we're going to do a couple more prayers. If you've got them in there, somebody tell people the page. One will make a mandala offering, which is that Dharma notes down there on the floor underneath your chair?
No.
But it's words.
It's words.
If you have the purest view, as all the Tibetans would say, you just have to reconfigure those letters and suddenly it becomes Dharma. So they always think, even every word, you know. And your telephone too, I bet it's got Dharma in it, hasn't it? There you go. Pop it up. You should have tables, but you haven't got tables, you people in chairs, have you? You can put it somewhere. Put it on over there. Okay. Or somewhere. But it's really got such auspicious meaning, you know. They say that whatever we treasure, you put it up high. It makes sense, you know. Anyway, whatever. Blah, blah. So now, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Okay, 2 prayers. One is a mandala offering, which is just, really, it's like if you go somewhere and visit a friend, you never go empty-handed. You offer something. So here's same thing. So we just imagine the Buddha's here. We understand the meaning of Buddha, it's true. Then we're going to offer a mandala, which basically really means all the lovely things of the universe that make people happy, which is the objects of the senses, all the lovely smells and tastes and sounds and things, piling them all up and offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, thinking like that. And the next little prayer we'll do is what's called the 7 limbs, if you have both of those somewhere.
Page 35.
Okay, fantastic. We'll do the mandala offering. So just imagine you're piling up all these lovely things and offering to the Buddha as if he were here himself. Saji Perki Jugshing Metog Tram Rirab Lingji Ni De Gen Padi Sange Jingdu Migte Ulwagi Drokonam Dag Jingla Chapashog. And we think the Buddha very happily accepts our offering. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And now the 7 limbs. Gosum Gupe Gone Chagtselo Nyashami Trul Churchen Malubul Togmene Sagdiktung Tamche Shag Geva gewa namla jeirang korwa matong bardu leg jugne drola cheki kolo korwa dang dag jen genam jang chub chen ponyo. Okay, so prayers really are just aspirations, hopefully with nice tunes. It's going to lift our hearts sometimes, you know. Okay. So the way I like to start, because the way the pack of the teachings were presented in Tibet, it was based on the assumption that this worldview was already in people's minds. So this was taught in a way for people who had the assumptions of consciousness being a continuity of mental moments, the assumption that consciousness is beginningless and endless, an assumption of the law of karma. These were there, they were implied. But that's not for us. We don't have those assumptions. That's why when we first heard this Lamrim package, it was just bizarre for us Westerners. So, and His Holiness Dalai Lama sees it, so he starts with different things. There's a way of starting, and also this has got a precedent. So the way to start for us in our culture is about what the mind is, because the mind is what gets enlightened. Like I said yesterday, the whole of the Buddhist path is implied, the methodology is implied in the very word Buddha. So let's hear it again. And I find this very tasty. The etymology of the word Sangye, the Tibetan equivalent of the word Buddha, Sanskrit, is Sang implies the utter eradication from one's mind of all ego grasping, all attachment, all aversion, and all the rubbish that comes from this, all the misconceptions, all the delusions, all the toxic emotions, all the unhappiness, all the rubbish that we are intimately familiar with. Buddha has found from his own experience and the depth of the subtlety of his own mind that this stuff is not at the core of our being and can be removed. And his methodology is explaining to us exactly, step by step, how to do that. But not only that, Gye, Buddha, da, implies the development to perfection of everything else in here, which he says is at the core of our being, indestructibly so, impossible to remove. This is a really fascinating point. That love, compassion, kindness, goodness, joy, bliss, intelligence, wisdom, you name it, that stuff is at the core of our being. It is what defines us. It is the very nature of our mind, like H2O, 2 bits of H and 1 bit of O is what water is. Well, this stuff is what our mind is in its nature. This is in a way of saying it. It's got a really powerful concept. So the second we hear this, and then we have a concept of the brain being the mind, this is beyond bizarre. It does not fit in our model. So this is why we have to put aside, if we can, not to squash them and make them say they're wrong, but try and realize there's another worldview, another packaging, another set of, its own internal logic. So we can't, we want to look at this. We've got the assumptions right now that we have are that our mind is the brain. Our assumption is Mummy made us, or indeed that a creator made us. We have all these assumptions. So this one already smashes in the face of that one. It's quite shocking. So we put our stuff aside. It's like if you've never heard of acupuncture, but you've only had the allopathic system, which is implied in our culture. It's embedded in us. You can't squeeze it into the allopathic system. It's another language, another worldview, another system with its own internal logic. It's exactly the same here. So when we realize that, we can put it over there, and then we can look at it with interest. Don't have to have a panic attack by hearing it, which is what we tend to do, because it argues with our assumptions. But it takes time because our assumptions are so embedded we don't notice. So that's implying the whole job. If it is that we are capable of removing all the rubbish and developing to perfection all the goodness, that's the meaning of the word Buddha, in essence. That's kind of radical. Like I've been saying all week, we can't conceptualize a person like that. But that we take that as our given here. So now if that's true, let's look at then what the mind is. Clearly the first question is, well, what's the mind, babe? If it's possible to remove all anger and jealousy and depression and all that stuff, then if I think it's the brain, we tried that in the 1930s. We called it a lobotomy and it didn't work. Which bits do we have to cut out? No, different discussion. We're not discussing the brain. We're discussing the cognitive process itself, which for the Buddha is not in its nature physical. It's not a function of the brain. The brain and the mind work beautifully together. You could say that, no problem. So it's a different discussion, So what do we do with this? We don't just chuck out one and swallow whole the other. No. We be intelligent. We be grown up. We take it as a hypothesis. We're prepared to look at it out of interest. Well, that's interesting. Let's look into that instead of, oh, don't be ridiculous, which is our first instinct, because we like our own views. We're all attached to our own views. Everybody is. So that's the starting point. Let's use that as our starting point in this big picture. So then we better know what the mind is. For the Buddha, what is it? So first of all, I'm quite sure I remember saying this stuff since I first started coming here in 1957. Not 57, sorry. I was a bit young then. 1997. I think 97 was my first year. I can't remember. 97. I think 97 was the first year I came here. And I'm sure I've been saying the same thing. I've been getting more from it, I tell you. I'm learning more as I go. So thank you for having me to talk, and I'm listening better. So, so what is the mind? Fundamental for the Buddhist view. If we don't get this, the whole of Buddhism is like a bizarre note of rubbish, We've got to know what he's talking about. And that's the point. The mind is Buddha's expertise. It is his expertise. It's shocking to hear this because we think religion means spirit, soul. He doesn't use that word. Not being rude, he just doesn't use that word. He uses the word mind or consciousness. So different ways of talking about the mind. Let's just touch upon them. First of all, it's not physical. Fundamental. Again, like I said before, the whole of Buddhism would collapse into a heap of absurd nonsense as a coherent worldview if the mind is not physical. First point. Second, it's got these far more subtle levels. So what's the function of mind? To cognize. The definition of mind. In Buddhism, you've got to define what things are so we can talk about them. Because the key point in Buddhism, one of the key points Buddha's saying, I'm leaping into a bit of a future point here. Well, no, it's implied by this one. That right now, our mind is full of layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of literally misconceptions at the level of being deep assumptions of truth. They're deeply embedded, hard to see. We've got to unpack them. That's Buddha's what he's saying, that our minds are full of misconceptions. And they are why we suffer. So the removal of those is the developing of wisdom. And the developing to perfection of the goodness is developing the compassion. That's the two wings of the bird, basically. So the problem is the misconceptions. And they're embedded and they're long time. And again, of course, the next point about the mind for the Buddha is it doesn't begin in our mother's womb. This is a really big shock, this one. We tend to have the creator religions and the materialist views. They're the two main, I mean, aside from, say, the Aboriginal Australians view, which is so abstract, like I said, I don't even understand it. I don't even quite know what they think. It's fascinating. They call it dream time. It's truly fascinating. But the big ones we know in the world are either mummy and daddy made you or God made you. They're the two general views, aren't they? So in each case, think about it. I began in my mother's womb. I began in my mother's womb. So we can't look into the past of God because God blesses us with a soul. But we can look into the past of the materialist one. We go back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, back to the monkeys, don't we? That's how we look at it. That's the view we have. Buddha has neither of these. He doesn't disagree that mummy and daddy give us a body, no probs, as we say in Australia. Australians shorten every word, no probs for no problems. But they give us a body, they give us a brain, they give us genes and DNA. And my way of putting it is they're the physical indicators. That's my way of putting it, of what's in the mind, which is not physical. But they do not give us a mind. They do not give us love, compassion, kindness, being good at music, psychopathy, whatever you've got in your mind. You're the wackest maniac in the world or the saintliest person in the planet. Anywhere between Hitler and Mother Teresa, those characteristics in their minds, anywhere in between all of us, are not the handiwork of our mummy and daddy. This is the thing we've got to continually remember. And we've got to put it together because it doesn't feel, because all of our, we'll talk about this. But first of all, it's shocking to hear this. We get confused when we hear this. Because that's the absolute assumption we have. Even if we're Christian, we still believe that mummy gave us anger and blah, 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 And all our psychology says it and our neuroscience. So it's truly in our bones, that view. So this is not necessarily throwing this view out. That's why the Dalai Lama the last 30, 40 years has been so amazing, because he likes to bring people together. Here's the reason why there's incredible conversations now among the scientists and, say, the Buddhists. And it's a shock and it's a marvellous thing for these scientists discovering this whole world of Indian history that they've never known anything about. Because as I said, I always say throughout the week, we Christian Jewish people are quite arrogant. We go back to the Greeks, The Jews go back further, it's true. And indeed back into other cultures, but we tend to be all sort of European now, isn't it? Which means kind of white people, roughly speaking, white people, being general about it. What do we know? I always say, what do we know about China? What do we know about Africa? What do we know about India? Zero, because we're so full of our own views. And that's normal. Every view's full of every country, every culture's full of their own views. That's how we are, isn't it? So anyway, when our mind is not physical. Good morning. Come on in. Okay. It is not a function. It is not the handiwork of mummy or daddy, and it is not, the other shock, the handiwork of a creator. Buddha does not assert a creator. So then clearly, so our mind is not physical. Our mind already, as I've described, has got this phenomenal, insane potential to be rid of all the rubbish and perfected in goodness. Buddha. Our mind goes to far more subtle levels, as I said briefly, but we'll go into this. Has got far more subtle levels of cognition. I was going to say the definition of everything. Buddha's saying, because of these delusions, we have to look into how things exist. All the teachings in Buddhism, like I said last night, lead to the wisdom teachings, where he really gets into the nitty-gritty of how things exist, ultimately. So then we have to be very clear about what we talk about, because he says we get everything wrong. So we have to establish, first of all, conventionally, what is something? What is a cup? What is a book? What is a clock? Then we can look into how it exists. So we have to know the definition. So the definition of our mind, definition has two parts. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. So in terms, for example, a cup, what's that, mummy? Well, darling, it's called a cup. And what is it? What is it? What's its definition, I might say? What is it? Well, sweetie, it's a flat-bottomed clay container. Can you see that? And I'll say, yeah, I'll get that. But the second part of that tells you its conventional characteristics. But the second part's the key. But mummy, what does it do? This is massive in Buddhist view in terms of understanding reality. We'll get to it all. We'll get to this one. We'll get to it. We might even start with it. It's very interesting. What does it do? What's its job? What's its function? It holds my tea. Well, don't believe her. We believe anything anyone tells us. We're suckers, you know. So don't believe her. She has to prove it. This is a really powerful point. You've got to prove what it is. So she'll get her tea and she will pour. And we will both see it fits the definition. It holds her tea. That's pretty good. But still more to go. Don't believe her yet. Now we've got to check up within our kind of worldview, the view, whether it's in Raleigh or the whole of the West or America, whatever you like, in the conventional world that we live in, are there any definitions of this thing that contradict that? And once we establish there aren't, we can tick the boxes, shake hands, agree. Now we all agree on what a cup is. Now we can begin to discuss how a cup exists. That's what we have to do. This is getting into the emptiness one, you know. And so here we're talking about the person. And so what is a person? We'll go into that later. So what's a mind? A mind is not physical. That's the conventional characteristics. It's not physical. They often use the term it is clear, meaning not physical. The second part, what does it do? This is the hugest thing. It cognizes. Or another verb, it knows. That's a bare bones verb. To cognize or to know. Or another one, to be aware. They're all synonyms. And that's the job of the mind. So you asked Buddha, well, that's good, but no, cognize what, please, Buddha? That which exists, baby. Because he says, right now we're living in la-la land. And we're cognizing things that don't exist. And that sounds kind of weird, but we'll get into this and you'll see it's true. We'll understand it. This is the kind of the basis of all the Buddhist approach. It's about the mind and how it cognizes. And that's why we have to know the mind and unpack it and unravel it and deconstruct it. Its contents internally, not the brain. This is unknown in our culture. So the precision and clarity and depth of analysis that we know we need to know brains is what exactly the Buddha demands we use to know our mind, for it to become the mind of a Buddha. Everything leads to this. This is the job of being a Buddhist. And everything in Buddhism, if it's valid, is a tool to help us do that job. So whether you do water bowls, whether you look like a 14th century weird person with a bald head, whether you do prostrations or you do this, you do your mantras, you do prayers, you visualize Tara, every one of these things which look so abstract and so weird to us, and we can't see any connection. What's that got to do with me knowing my mind? Well, it has everything to do with it. And if it doesn't, throw it out and give it right back to the Buddha. It's a load of rubbish. It's superstition. This is so important to understand. And because it's such a foreign package to us, it's Tibetan. It's been sitting up in the mountains there for 1,200 years untouched, coming from India, where it was so pure and alive. You know? So it's up to us. For whatever reason, it's come to Raleigh. You know? How? So this is what's so interesting with karma. We'll go into this. But you know, we have to have been Tibetans in the past. We would not be sitting in this room if we hadn't been, because we create the causes for everything. So Lama Yeshe says, karma takes care. Well, somehow we all died in Tibet at some point, and we found mummies in Raleigh or Melbourne, you know. We're sitting there like waiting, and then Buddha comes along, Dalai Lama comes out of Tibet. We go, oh, hi there. We've been waiting for you, and now we start to learn it again. It's kind of very funny. I know you're not laughing, but never mind. We did all this, you know. We made it happen. We're sitting here going, wow, you know, who did all this to me? Where am I? Who is this? What's this stuff, you know? Anyway, I'm raving on this morning. I better be careful. I'm feeling a bit mischievous. So, okay, the mind is not physical. The mind has far more subtle levels of cognition, which just naturally has the capacity, like the microscope of our mind, to cognize subtler phenomena. The mind has this insane, marvelous natural potential, according to Buddha's experiences, okay? The mind's job is to cognize that which exists. But where did it begin? Our first question. Where did I begin, please? Well, you did not begin in your mummy's womb. Robina, the package began, put the bits and pieces of the body and the mind together, labelled Robina. That package began at the, you could argue at the first section of conception, when the mind came into the egg and sperm and joined the egg and sperm, and then began to develop into the fetus, and then popped out. A little Bobsy popped out, 2 months early, backwards, apparently. My poor mother. Just as well I was 2 months early. I know, that's right. Anyway, so that's, little Bobsy this little package came out. So that began at the conception. Clearly it did, the evolution of that one. But the mind didn't have an absolute beginning. If you're Christian, it goes back to God. If you're a materialist, it goes back to the monkeys. You understand my point? But here, where does it go back to? Previous moments of this continuity of mental moments. So the mind can be often known as a river of mental moments, is my term, or a mental continuum. A river of mental moments is a nice one, or sort of, river of mental moments. This moment of consciousness coming to the previous, going to the previous, going to the previous, and an unbroken chain of mental moments. Think about it. If you had perfect memory, you'd see that. And you go inexorably back to the first second of conception, because you keep going back. This moment, where'd that one come from? The previous one. You'll get back to conception. And then you go, what about, where'd that come from? Well, if your body goes back to egg and sperm, no problems, and that goes to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, monkeys, that's that track. Right, naturally. Then if you're a Christian, it goes back to God, or a Muslim goes back to God, or if you're a Jew, it goes back to God. The Hindus talk about God, but like a different way, They also talk about karma, going back, but somehow there's a different view there. But not for the Buddha. Our consciousness is non-physical river of mental moments, tracks it back to a previous moment of itself. Clearly at a subtler level, not combined with this body, and not more than a few weeks before that, up to 7 maybe, it was in another body, and so on and so forth, back and back and back and back. And then when you die, forward and forward and forward and forward. This is just the worldview. This is the view, and it's been around for 5,000 years, this view, roughly speaking, with the Hindus first, and then Buddha came along and he diverged in his own direction, and then there's a very distinct approach that the Buddhists have, okay? So this is the mind. This is the view of the mind, and this is not. You don't have to believe this. No one's asking you to, but we're just presenting it. So we'll take it as our hypothesis in this room this weekend. Okay, we're taking this as our working hypothesis. That's the only way to say it. That's the only way I say it. I never say, "Oh, I believe in karma, believe in this." You just become very intellectually lazy, I think, because we just like to believe in certain things if it's nice. It's like we go around shopping. I believe in this one, but not this one. I believe in that one. That's good. Now package together. That's my religion. That's kind of not very adult, in my opinion. A bit sort of like ridiculous. So we'll take it as a hypothesis here, okay? So consciousness is, in fact, beginningless. You can't find a first moment, as wacky as that sounds, because it's the product of cause and effect, and it's endless. According to the Mahayana, the Theravadan views have a different view. The Theravadins would say that, consciousness ends when you've realized emptiness and perfected it and achieve your own nirvana. Then you die and you're gone like a puff of smoke. Very different view. That we're talking the Mahayana view here. So there's different discussions among the Buddhists, and that's perfectly fine. Debate is helpful, good, but it's up to each one of us, to look into these things and prove it to ourselves eventually. So that's the mind. That's the mind, broadly speaking, technically, intellectually, technically, theoretically. So, then we look at this view. If it's true that we can rid the mind of all the nonsense, if it's true we can become liberated from suffering and its causes, as the way Buddha would put it, which is the delusions, they're the cause of suffering, the nonsense. If it's true we can be liberated from that, which is the first one, sang or bud, the second one, da or gye, that we can not only that, but we can perfect the goodness within us. This is the bodhisattva path. We can perfect the goodness, and become this insanely outrageous, amazing being pervading the universe who can manifest in bodies bopping around the universe to benefit sentient beings. As science fiction as that sounds, that's the Buddha's view of what our potential is. So if that's true, that's the end result, Buddha. If that's true, that tells us the job. It implies the job. We better know what the mind is, and we better know how to distinguish in this mind of ours between the neuroses and the goodness. That's the essential job of being a Buddhist, from here to Buddhahood, from here to nirvana, all the way to whichever nirvana it is, your own nirvana of liberation from samsara or the nirvana of Buddhahood. That's the job to be done. That's the actual job of being a Buddhist. And all the other stuff we do, watching our breath, meditating, as I'm saying, all these things, they are tools that we use that enable us to do the job of ridding the mind of the rubbish and perfecting the goodness. That's the essence of it. That's expressing the entire path. And if we can lose sight of that, we just get lost in the woods, which we do so commonly, especially Tibetan Buddhism, because it seems so arcane and so esoteric and so strange and unusual to us. And it's not surprising, because it is so complex. And what do we say? We lose the wood. What do you lose the tree for the woods? What do you say? What's that saying?
You can't see the forest for the trees.
And that means you can't get the big picture. We get lost in the details. Details are fundamentally important, but we've got to know the big picture, the goal. The goal is Buddha. Then we've got to know the job. And then we have to know all the tools that help us do that job. If you never lose sight of that, you'll be fine. I promise. So this is not a complicated concept, is it? This is not too complicated. But we lose track of it. We get lost, you know. So if that's the job, if that's the goal, like I said, the essential job is to know what the mind is, then to recognize what are delusions, what are neuroses, and to recognize what are virtues, what are goodness, and then to know first theoretically, and then to be able to recognize them in my mind. Using what? Your own mind. This is the expertise of these genius Indians, who are the ones, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, more than 3,000 years ago, were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self, the nature of reality. That's incredible, unbelievable, brilliant. And the Buddha came out of that tradition. He went as far as he could go, you know. That's amazing. That's stunning. And every word I'm saying has got this evolution in that system, several thousand years, and before that, up to 5,000 years, you know. When you go to Varanasi, we go there on our pilgrimage, right? It's the oldest continuously occupied city on the planet, I think. That's what people say, Varanasi. I think that's right. Isn't that right, anybody who's an Indian? Do you know that? Or probably if you're an Indian, you're an American, you don't know Indian history. If you're an American Indian. I think that's right. What? That's right, exactly. It's true, isn't it? It's true. Well, look on Wikipedia, they'll tell you that. Anyway, okay. So this job, so where does that job, if that's the essential job, where does it fit in this big package called the Lamrim, or this course that leads you to Buddhahood? This graded path. So, you know, you got the first stages, what I like to call junior school. In the Lamrim, they call it the first scope, the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Then that's, I like to call junior school, because we immediately get that concept. Then we know that comes before high school. So that's the middle scope, or the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability, and that leads you to the great scope, which is the teachings and disciples, the teachings and blah blah blah, blah of the great capability. That's the compassion. That's the bodhisattva path, and then you got the postgraduate, Tantrayana or Vajrayana. So that's the entire course to Buddhahood: grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, and you graduate. It's a gradual path. It's a great term in English. In French, they don't use that concept of grade 1, but in English it's really sensible. Gradual path, grade 1, grade 2, and you graduate as a Buddha. It makes sense to us. It makes sense to us. And this is a hugely important point, like I mentioned all week, that we often don't think about, that the spiritual, this worldview of Buddhism, which is the contents of our spiritual path, the one should internalize if you're a Buddhist, if you choose to be. It's incremental, it's gradual. There's beginner stuff, middle stuff, advanced stuff, and the highest. It's sort of reasonable. We learn everything like that. There's nothing we learn that isn't gradual. The simple stuff first, the more advanced and the most advanced. It's just kind of something we take for granted and we get it psychologically. But we're not used to thinking of a spiritual path like that. So whereas, for example, we always think of a spiritual path as about love and compassion, and it is. But that's university level. That's a very big surprise to us. Compassion is not enough, as His Holiness says. You've got to have the first part, first junior school and high school. That's the wisdom wing. How we've been talking all week, you know. So, where do you begin the actual job of looking into your mind? Interestingly, that's not till high school. That's when you begin the actual job. That's when you're ready, the actual job. Now we get to see what the mind is. Now we get to learn some concentration. And now we understand the contents of the mind, because we learn the theories of it, and now we start to unpack and unravel. Be your own therapist, as Lama Tsongkhapa puts it. That's high school. So you have to ask, well, what's junior school then? It's like preparation. And we've discussed it. So basically that's where you learn all about karma. The law of cause and effect, the law that runs the universe, the law in which the universe runs. No one runs it, because Buddha does not assert a creator. There's no boss except us, which is a big shock. We're the boss, Buddha says. It takes us a while to see this, I tell you. So the law of karma, like the law of botany. Everything that grows on this planet, you know, we don't have to know botany or not, and gardens don't need to know botany. They just do their trip. Given the components of the universe, given the dependent arising of what a universe is, our world, things grow. We get that. And clever humans have come along and observed those things and have articulated the laws. How intelligent, how kind of them. Then we can learn those laws too, so we can work with gardens and grow our own. That's exactly how it is. That's the law of karma for the Buddha, but it's the law that runs minds. It's the law that determines happiness and suffering. It's the law that runs all sentient beings, or all sentient beings' experiences are governed by this law. So we need to learn this law, Buddha says, so that we can start to realize that we are in charge of our lives. We are the ones who create our own happiness, and we are the ones that create our own suffering. This is an intense concept. And it's not just a general idea psychologically, we kind of know it, but from the big picture point of view, this is Buddha's approach. So we better learn it. Fundamental. You just don't say, oh yeah, there's botany, I believe in botany. Please explain what a rose is. Oh, I don't know that. What good is believing in it? Useless. And this is a massive point. I always talk about this in all the week I have. And it's like I said, a huge difference that's implied in the Buddhist approach, which is implicit if you've been a Tibetan and you hear the Lamrim, because it's just implicit. They just know they don't talk about a creator. But we have to learn that, because we're coming from the view either of the materialist view, which is embedded in our mind, or the Christian or Muslim view or Jewish view, which is embedded in our mind. So if we come from those and show interest in Buddhism, we've got to hear basic points that contradict those ones, because they're the views that are embedded. So Buddha has no view of a creator. He's not being rude, he's not being arrogant, he's not a communist, you know. He's a Buddhist. Well, that's just the word we use, isn't it? And that's his view from his own experience. So what's that mean? It's a massive point to understand. Because when we hear about, when we hear about morality, when we hear about ethics, which is junior school, we're going to get to it. That's the law of karma. Another way of putting it is Buddha's view of ethics. It's a way of presenting ethics, Buddha's view of ethics. It's a detailed, intricate, extraordinary presentation of ethics. Exactly what it is. That's taken from the point of view of mind being beginningless and endless, and therefore including future and past lives. It's a much bigger, broader view, rather than the materialist one, which is just this life, or rather than the Christian one, which is this life and then heaven in future lives. So it's continuity. So, okay. So then the assumption here is, in the Buddha, if there's no creator, then the view is, as Dalai Lama says, karma, and we're getting into junior school. I'm just giving kind of overview of kind of ideas here, then I'm going to go into the details, okay? So the junior school level, not beginning to be a Buddhist yet, we're just getting the preparation, still based upon the Buddha's views, where we learn about good ethics, the view is that we are in charge. So whereas if I'm a good Christian, as my Jesuit priest said, when I asked him what is a sin, and he said by definition it's doing what God said not to do, going against God's will, this is a massively important point to understand. And that is a perfect thing if you accept a creator. And I'm not criticizing it. If you live your life with faith in a creator and you do what the creator says, you will be rewarded. Perfect. Nothing wrong. It's just not the Buddha's view, that's all. And that is the basis of our view of morality. Even in the ordinary world, the materialist world, we have the same view philosophically, that good ethics is something that people put upon us, and we will get punished if we don't do it, and we'll get rewarded if we do. That's the same view as Christian teachings. Nothing wrong if you accept that life. If you do what the police say, do what the judge says, do what mummy says, you'll be a good girl and you'll get rewarded. Nothing wrong. But it's just not Buddha's view, that's all. And this is the major point I'm trying to make. It's a fundamentally different philosophical view. Buddha is not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. Therefore, he is not the boss. Therefore, he is not telling us what to do because he says so. Whereas Jesus is telling us what to do because God said so. It's a completely different view. And you'd have to decide yourself. So the Buddha's view is, he exalts us just in the beginning stages. Okay, the junior school level, essentially the essence of the junior school level, there's more to it than this. The essence of the junior school level is abide by the laws of karma, of cause and effect. Live an ethical life. What's that mean? Don't do negative actions. What's a negative action for Jesus? An action that God said you shouldn't do. What's a negative action for a Buddhist? An action that's driven by a negative motivation that harms another, but in fact harms you. And any action that is motivated by a negative action by a delusion is a negative action. Any action that's motivated by a virtue is a positive action, in general, you could say. So that's the Buddha's definition of virtue. Nothing to do with the fact that he says it. And we get that in principle. If you go to your doctor and she says, don't smoke, you might get cancer. You don't say, how dare you tell me what to do? You mean you're going to punish me with cancer if I smoke? We do not say that. We get that principle. We know she's a kind person who's warning us and shows us these shocking consequences in a video of what happens if you smoke. We don't see it as punishment and reward, and this is a major point to make. This is we're intelligent. We go, thank you for showing me, my God, I don't want that future result, so I'm going to stop smoking. But the Buddha tells us, don't kill. Why not, Buddha? Because if you do, it'll cause you future suffering. And we go, oh, that sounds like punishment, you know. Who do you think you are telling me what to do? No, Buddha is exactly the same as a doctor. He's not a punisher. Jesus will tell you that. If you go against God's will, you'll suffer. And that's okay if you have faith in Jesus, nothing wrong. But when we want to resist that, we think, oh, no one's going to tell me what to do. We say, I'm going to do what I like, we say, as if somehow I'm going to get out of the way of people telling me what to do and I'm going to be free now. That's how we think. Well, you know, that's okay. And that's where it only goes so far. But whereas we think the opposite of doing what Mummy said, because the same in your mummy's household. Don't do that. Why not? We all know her answer, because I say so. So then this is the point. With that view, with Mummy and Daddy, and not with God, because you know God always sees you, but with Mummy and Daddy and the police and the judge and vaguely they out there whom we feel are squashing us and telling us what to do, feeling all repressed, we think if I don't get caught doing it, oh, I got away with it. Don't we? Don't we? That's the limitation of this view. That's like thinking you go home after you've seen your doctor and you don't see your doctor anywhere. Oh, phew, and out come the Marlboros. I won't get cancer. She doesn't see me smoke. People will laugh at you. Why? Because we know that cancer and smoking have a natural relationship and it's a natural law. It's not imposed by the doctors and made up. That's the difference. That's the Buddha's view. But it's very hard for us to hear it. We hear it as punishment and reward because we have inbuilt into our ego this guilt and I'm bad. We do that mistake. Don't blame your Jewish mother or your Catholic mother. This is embedded in ego grasping. It's the mistake that our ridiculous mind makes. It's the dualistic mistake that our mind makes. You know, of being neurotic and feeling we're being punished, feeling we should be rewarded. This hubris of attachment and aversion. This takes time to unpack, I tell you. So Buddha's like a doctor. With his own intelligence, he's observed. And not just observed that, you know, so we're going to go into the details about karma. And this is the big picture view, the worldview, all the different realms of existence. All this is the big picture in Buddha's view. Driven by the law of karma. It's like we're learning botany here. And botany is the law that determines your gardens. Well, Buddha says our life is our garden and we all create it. Whatever we're experiencing now is the fruit of our past seeds. And whatever we plant now will bring the future. So you better learn the laws, baby. But we fight and we yell and we shout and we think it's the same as being punished and we can't stand it and you mean I'm going to go to hell if I do this and you mean it's like we get panic stricken and kind of like burst into tears and can't bear it. It sounds so shocking to us, you know. And because we only interpret all the bad things, like I joke and I say I've never had a question yet. No one's ever asked me why do good things happen, because we only hear about karma in terms of bad things. And our ego runs to bad things, you know. Oh, you mean I'm a bad person, we say. Oh, you mean I must have been a bad person in the past. But we never say, oh, wow, I must have been a good person in the past. Wow, amazing. How fortunate I am. We never think that. Because we're addicted to misery. Ego is addicted to misery. Okay, so the essence of junior school is to prepare us to really get to the real job. The essence of junior school is abide by the laws of karma. The essence of high school is work on your mind and start to deconstruct and unpack and unravel the nonsense so you begin to really identify and distinguish the neuroses from the virtues. The essence of university is to benefit others. Continuing to work on your mind, that never stops all the way to Buddhahood, but it's in reference to others now. And then the essence of the Vajrayana is where you complete it and speed up, going like 1,000,000 miles an hour to get to Buddhahood. That's the Lamrim. Do you understand? Have you heard any of this before? Have any of you never heard a word of this before? Oh, yeah, so all of you have. Oh, that's helpful. Unless you're too scared to admit. It's okay, you know. This is a summary of the Lamrim. Get to the essence of it. The essence of junior school is abide by the laws of karma. The essence of high school is start to work on your mind, the real job of being a Buddhist. The essence of the compassion wing is continue to work on your mind, but it's in reference to others. The wisdom wing, junior school and high school, is for your sake. The compassion wing is for the sake of others. The job is the same, working on your mind, all the way to Buddhahood. And the essence of the Tantrayana one is like the culmination of all of this, where you completely can do the quickest job possible. On the basis of all this practice, you can then whiz to enlightenment. That's it. That's the essence of it. So let's unpack these pieces now, okay? But first, before we do that, let's have some questions. Not about going into detail, because I'm going into detail now of all these things. I'll go into detail about karma, I'll go into detail about the mind, go into detail about compassion, and I'll touch upon Vajrayana before we finish the weekend. So just in terms of clarity of definitions and things, how about some questions? Yes, sweetheart. Mics, please. Yes.
Yes, you talked about that the job of the mind is cognition. So where does human emotion fit
Bit
into
louder,
that?
please.
I said where the job of the mind
Yes,
is cognition.
to cognize,
Where does human emotion come into play? Because human emotion can either be positive or negative.
No, absolutely.
And so where is that balance relative to what the job of the mind is?
That we'll get when we get to high school. We're going to go into detail. Yeah, you prepared to wait for that? That'll be this afternoon.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
We're going to do junior school first.
Fair enough.
We'll get to that. I'll go into detail. So that's where we have to really look at the meaning of the word mind, which incorporates emotions. It's all incorporated there. We'll go into it exactly. Okay. Yes. Yes.
This is possibly a naive question, but you touched on
Jason, grab some hot water.
it. Is this on? Is this on? Okay. This is possibly a naive question, but when you touched on the non-physical mind connecting with the physical DNA, all that at conception.
Jason, just bring my mug out. Just bring my mug out. Unless you have a thermos. Do you have a thermos? Go on. Thank you, John. Thank you. So sorry, beg your pardon.
No
Thinking
worries.
about my own hot water to drink.
Yeah.
Go on.
This is a curiosity that I've had in learning about the non-physical mind connecting with the physical body at conception and so forth. Is it seen, is the increase in population of the world seen as a net positive thing, that there are more minds being connected to bodies?
Of humans. You could, in general, you could say yes, but we'll go into I'm going to go to karma now, and we'll touch that point.
Okay.
But in general, of
Because
course.
I've been confused about that. Of like
No,
more and
in
more
general,
people.
yes. In general, yes. Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay.
But there's a doubt. There's a sort of a negative take on it as well, which I'll touch on when I talk about karma. Okay.
Okay.
What else? Yes.
Hi.
Hello there.
So you were talking about the cup and then conventional, it's a conventional reality and we agree on it and we part.
Then we can discuss its ultimate reality. Eventually we can do that.
And if I understand right, conventional reality is what makes us all be able to survive in this samsaric world.
Not
They're
quite that.
conventions.
Conventional reality is how things exist at a conventional level, which is what is a lid, what is a cup, what is a clock, what is a cloth. We have to distinguish each thing and know its function, and then we work with all those
Right,
things.
right.
That's
So-
the conventional way of describing.
and-
That's how Buddha would describe how things exist conventionally. Independence upon causes and conditions and other things.
Right, but it's the function of certain things that allows for people to get along and function in the world. Is that an
Sure,
accurate-
whatever. But that's
So my question is, I'm seeing, and again, I'm 57 years old, and I'm seeing stuff from people that I have never seen before in terms
But this has
of...
got nothing to do with conventional reality.
It does nothing.
Nothing at all.
Okay.
That's just about behavior. Good behavior,
Okay.
bad behavior. That's karma. We'll talk about that now.
Okay, because I thought it was maybe a breakdown of conventional...
No, not
agreements
like
or-
that. It's a different meaning. Different
Okay.
meaning altogether.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. What else, people? Yes, up here and down there. Yes, sweetheart.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. The first one is off topic, but the Laudo trek.
Bit closer to the mic.
The Laudo trek.
Louder trek, yes.
Laudo.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
It says May 2020.
I know
on
it's
the
a
card.
mistake.
Okay.
We put the postcards out before we realised we couldn't do May, so on the website it's October.
It's
October's correct.
Okay, because
So I
there's
should have
also
warned you.
March on the
I know
website.
yeah, I know, darling. It's October.
Okay, October.
October 2020. Yeah, you're right. I should have put a note on the postcard. May
Okay.
was before we just changed the we changed the date.
And then
She should have said May as a mistake. She didn't say that?
no.
Oh, she should have. I'll tell her. Thank
Okay.
you. Very good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was my friend Christina who runs it. I'll let her know. Go on.
And then, so I have with the karma thing.
Yep.
Building on what he said earlier.
Yep.
If my karma has created the situation I'm in now.
Yep.
So I have a very angry child that I struggle with.
Okay, we're going to go into details about karma.
Okay, because I
Let's-
was like, I struggle with where I fit versus him.
Oh, okay. That's the compassion wing. That's how to help him.
Okay, because he
So we
doesn't seem to listen to anything I say.
No, that sounds pretty reasonable person. I understand that. Don't we all recognize that? That's called being, whatever. So that's more to do with how to help. So here in the compassion wing, in the wisdom wing, we're trying to work out how to help ourselves, sort ourselves out, get rid of our own rubbish, get past beyond our own noses so we can go, wow, now I understand my son. Now I know how to help him. But if we're caught up in our own mess, we can't see past our own nose and we see our son through our own neuroses, through the lenses of our own neuroses, then nightmare. And that's how mostly why we get ridiculous.
Yeah.
So let's look at, we've got to put ourselves together first, understand why my own mind and why I'm suffering, and then you go, wow, now I understand my son. And then you have much more wisdom to know how to help him. Because compassion is the wish to help, but it's the wisdom we get from working on our own mind that enables us to do it.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So we're going to get to the wisdom wing first, and that
Okay.
implies how to help others. But first
Okay.
we have to help ourselves. You get me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Somebody back there. Here first. Yes. Yes.
So when you were talking about the different levels of the Lamrim path.
That's right.
And is it something that you have to master one level before moving on to the next
To some
level?
degree, you have to have some, but in the same way that you don't wait till you. In other words, you've got to pass grade 1 in music, right? Then you're going to go to grade 2. But you know very well, when you've got to grade 12, you play grade 1 ever better, don't you? When you play grade 1 and you've got grade 12 under your belt, your grade 1 is so much more superior. So superior, isn't it? It doesn't stay static. Your grade 1 music becomes impeccable. So it's like that. You've got some semblance of understanding of the first bit, so you can go to the second. Some semblance of understanding, and in the end, you're going to be able to apply all the pieces all the way to Vajrayana in one day. But the logic is you won't perfect high school until you've perfected junior school. You won't perfect university until you've perfected high school, and you can't perfect the Vajrayana until you've perfected the others. So in that sense, but you can practice all of them, and they will all keep getting better, and they will all inform each other. Do you understand?
Yeah, and so
Are you sure you understand?
I
You've got a very
understand.
sharp, bright, busy mind. I can see it moving ahead. Are you sure you heard me?
I understand that you have to have some understanding, some foundation of each
Yeah, of
level.
course. You've got to
before
pass the
moving on.
exam and say this
Yeah.
is that and that's this and fit know what renunciation is, and know what this one is, and know what that one is. Of course you do. But then you keep perfecting all of them as you move along. Do you not see that?
I see that. So
where's the
my
problem?
question is, what is the exam? How do you know that
then-
you have that you're
Okay, that's
ready
a really
to move
good point.
on
How
to
do
the
you
next?
know? How do you know if you've passed grade 1?
Yeah.
I'm asking you. You tell me. How do you know you've passed grade 1?
Because a teacher tells me.
Precisely, there's a certain set of criteria.
Yeah.
Well, the same in the Lamrim, if you read it properly.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
That's the answer.
All right. Thank you.
But our trouble is we're swimming. We don't know where we are. It's a problem.
Yeah.
We don't know where we are. We probably haven't even begun to pass grade 1 yet. We're sort of pre. So at least we can know the theories first. At least if you can know a good answer is if you can say, okay, I'm saying the words here, right? I'm saying words about the Lamrim. Now I'm telling you, I know the theories. And every time I teach, I get a bit better at the theories I've remembered them. I'm not looking at my book to check what was the second one, what was that third one. I've got a general idea. Why? Because I've been saying it all these years and trying to study it. So I can say I can pass the exam very nicely in the Lamrim in general, but to experience it, that grows slowly. So theory first, then experience, gradually. So at least if you can present the Lamrim to somebody and know experientially what it means, grade 1, grade 2, and the way I'm using it, then that's already pretty good. That's already fantastic. And then you can begin to observe whether you really have actually passed that one. And the proof of the pudding is how you behave in your daily life. So you can know the theory that anger causes you suffering. Then you start shouting at your sister, I haven't passed that one yet, but at least I know the theory. Good start. Do you get my point? It's step by step, you know?
So we can it can be beneficial to understand it, the entire path intellectually.
Oh my God, and you must.
Okay.
How can you tell to other people if you can't?
Yeah.
If you can't open your mouth and say the answers, even you know you haven't experienced it yet, you've got to be able to help others. Tell them. That's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best to put my money where my mouth is. You get my point?
I get your point.
If you can't say it to others, you're useless to you're useless to others. You know, you say, "Oh no, it's beyond words." That's how people think of experience. Oh, it's beyond words. Well, don't be so selfish. Kindly give me the theory so I can. Kindly give me the recipe so I can get the taste as well. You're not trying to pass on the taste to somebody. You pass on the theories.
I gotcha.
You understand?
Mm-hmm.
You can inspire people to get the taste, but we only can get the taste. You can try and tell me about what chocolate cake tastes like till the cows come home. It'll never work, but you can give me the theory. Thank you, and I can make my own cake. That's the point of words. That's the power of words. That's the Buddha's greatest gift. They call it the power. They call it the power of speech. That your words. That's the relative dharma. The actual dharma is the knowledge in Buddha's mind. What good is that to anybody? We can't read his mind, so he puts it into concepts for us. How kind. Then we take. It's like Bach. Bach's sitting with all his music in his head, right? That's his real music, is in his mind. But he kindly puts it on little pieces of paper, little notes, so we can get it to internalize our Bach.
Yeah.
That's the point about the conceptual. So conceptual is necessary, but our biggest danger is we think we know it all because we know the words. That's our danger in our culture because we're all so clever.
Yeah.
We're all so educated.
That
That's the biggest danger. The biggest danger is getting stuck in the intellect and not knowing how to get the experience. That's the biggest nightmare for us. That's the biggest danger. Do you understand?
I understand.
Good.
Thank you.
But don't ever dismiss the intellectual. It's great.
That is a perfect segue to my question.
Good, darling.
I am in kindergarten, and
Like the rest of
I
us,
am
I
in the
promise.
process of controlling body, speech, and mind.
Well done.
And the curtain is being lifted up, and there is a lot of dirt on that very clean plate, my Buddha nature.
That's right.
And there is this anxiety-provoking situation that comes up, and I would like to ask you, because it's just this non-stop situation, and is there some sort of compassion that I can use myself, exercise to work through it? You know, some sort of way to say it'll be okay, and
Yeah, but you're already saying it.
okay.
You're right. But the point is this, if we're taking the Buddhist view to it all, the more you understand karma, the more you understand good ethics, the more you understand the way the mind works, the more you understand that your own crazy mind... Wait, keep the mic. The more you understand the way the mind is full of chaos that's there, and the more you know that as you're looking at the mind, you see the chaos, then they're the tools to help you have the courage to go, this is the way it is. It's not concrete. It's not my real nature. It's okay. I can ride these waves. But the more we understand attachment, which we're going to get into, that it's a panic-stricken little infant in there that only wants the nice things. So that's why we have a panic attack. Attachment is this junkie that only can bear the nice things. So lessening attachment makes us immensely brave and courageous to confront the garbage and bring it on, baby. I can handle it. All of that comes with this awareness of these different points.
There's this continuous energy of that thought process.
Of course it is. That's how it is. That's how it is. That's how it is.
And it feels overwhelming.
That's why I answered what I said.
Yes.
Be brave. It cannot destroy you. But with awareness and intelligence and tools which you have, you can be continually brave to work with it. You've got to continually tell yourself you can do it. 47 people can tell you can do it, but you have to have a confidence that you can. And the irony is the confidence that you can is the cause of doing it. Did you hear me? One step at a time. And get every help you can, get as many hugs as you can, have as many weeps as you like. It's great. All on the path. It's all part of the deal. Do you understand? So let's now let's start unpacking karma. Let's unpack junior school. But there's some preliminary stuff to that. As we know, if we've studied the Lamrim, the Buddha Atisha, based on Atisha's text in the 11th century, Tsongkhapa takes that as his basis. So what he gets us to tell us first is that if you're going to go into this path, enter into junior school, the first thing Tsongkhapa says is, first of all, we've done the one about the mind. That's the beginning. That's a starting preliminary. Get a sense of what the mind is and what its potential is. We started with that. So now Tsongkhapa in the 14th century, he put in this little contemplation that we have to do, that if we're going to engage in this path and become a Buddha, guess what? We need a person to guide us on the way. This is uncharted territory, you know. So this is just a brief discussion about the necessity for a teacher. I'll just touch on it briefly. You can discuss it later, whatever you like. But it's a really good starting point. If you're going to do this, you better find a teacher. If you want to make a cake, you better find a teacher. If you want to play Bach, you better find a teacher. It's fairly evident, you know. It's fairly obvious to us. Anything we've learned in our life since we were born is coming from someone showing us. Whether we read a book or watch someone or someone tells us, it's the same thing. You know, we know this, which is why it's all the more curious that, what happened? Oh, there it is. So that's why it's all the more curious for us when the commonest question I've seen we ask in the West, oh, to get enlightened, do I need a teacher? It's kind of, nobody would say that if you want to learn to play music. Nobody would ask that question if you want to become like a physicist. It's just a given. It's a given. But for me, the fact that we ask that question, what's happening here? Is this like a tea break or something? You want a tea break? I can give you one. I'm sorry. I thought lunch was noon. That's all. We only got 2 hours. And John can't wait to go out and get his cup of tea. Not to mention Jason, because he got mine first, so that gave him an excuse. No wonder we have obstacles. No, you're okay, because you got an excuse. John hasn't. It's okay. 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 So we need a teacher, someone to show us, a knowledge holder. Rigsin. Knowledge holder. It's a lovely word, you know. It is so evident, especially this, all the more this. So I think the fact that we ask that question in our culture indicates what weird ideas we have about spiritual. Some sense we have about spiritual is we have to go into this mind of ours and see what marvelous things are there and come up with something that's in there somehow. We hear it's all in the mind, so we think we have to search for it. The Buddhist approach is no, the potential is there. We have to learn how to harness it. We've got potential to be a musician. So we all know you just don't go to a piano and start making sounds, hoping Bach will come out. You'll take quite a while. Same here. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. So then how do you find a teacher? Well, it's already very confusing, you know, because there's thousands of people who say they've got spiritual techniques. So even that is like a minefield. If you're in Tibet, it wouldn't be a problem. 99.9% Buddhist, so it's easy to find which monastery you wanted, you know. But it's quite difficult now in the West with, let's say Buddhism. And even forget about Buddhism, there are countless methods. So then if we hear the word enlightenment or Buddha, let's say we hear that word, that narrows it down, doesn't it? Even among Buddhists, because some Buddhists, like in Thailand, you know, the Theravadan approach, Thailand, Burma, would suggest that most of us, some people have the potential to be a Buddha, but most of us have only the potential to be liberated, to achieve our own nirvana. So even then, that narrows it down, even among the Buddhists. So if you say the word Buddha and you're attracted to that, then it narrows you right down to teachings in Tibet, teachings in China, and teachings in Japan, and maybe some teachings in Vietnam, perhaps, some Mahayana teachings. So that's narrowed it down. So then let's say, you know, and then if you want to practice Vajrayana, you've heard about Vajrayana to lead you to Buddhahood, then that narrows you down very easy to Tibet. So already you can do the analysis and it narrows you down, depending. And then you think you just might be the word of Buddha, you're attracted. Because we've got our own lineage, as Buddha says. We get born with a tendency, you know. So let's just say we've come to the conclusion we've heard about Vajrayana, we've heard about Buddha, and we've decided we'd like to, you know, we've heard about and then we see the Dalai Lama. Well, he's a good example, isn't he? He's an easy example to look at. The world thinks he's gorgeous. If you're not Chinese communist, he's gorgeous, you know, they think he's a monster. So, you know, let's say, so then the way with a teacher, and I discussed this when I made a cake, I think I said this yesterday, it's a perfect, absolutely perfect example. It's logically a perfect example. The first thing here is, the first point in finding a teacher, in anything, is that you have to want to do it. We bring a horse to water, you cannot make it drink. And that's a powerful meaning in Buddhism. It's massively important. You do not force it down someone's throat. This is so crucial. It's not kind of some strange idea. Psychologically, it's sound. Like I said about my mother, she always knows how to make cakes. Since I was born, she knew how to make a cake. But I showed no interest in cake making, so I didn't ever bother to ask her. She could see I was not interested, so she didn't force me to make cakes. I showed no interest in kitchens, period. I assumed somebody else cleaned the kitchen and did the cooking, you know. So it was like I told you, so that's really logical. You can't force a person, we know that. That's why there's no benefit in blurring out of your mouth all your exciting new finds, whether it's a new movie or a new football team or a new spiritual path. People have want to know about what you have to say. There's nothing more boring, we know this, than a person shoving down our throat their new find. It's so self-centered, you know, and it doesn't work. Oh, you must see this movie. I'll bring you. I'll buy the ticket. Thank you, Robina. I don't want to go. No, I'll buy the ticket. You know, no, thank you. We're so determined to shove our own stuff onto other people. This is the worst of the most bizarre ideas. So the Buddhist one is so important, so careful about that. You mind your own business. You act it, you show it, and you be a good example. Maybe then people might. But you should have no anxiety to share it with others, unless a person wants. This is so important. Because why? It's not because of a secret reason, because the person has to want it. So it was so clear about cakes. It took me till I was 25 to even have the thought. And like I said, I remember the moment. I want to make a cake. And that led me then to the next step. Oh, I better find someone to show me. And then I thought of my mum. I'd done my due diligence automatically. And like I said, what is that? And that's the same in Buddhism. You check the students. You check the behavior of the person. You check the product. You read the books and think about it. You check all these different things. And why should you do that? It's so logical, because you don't have the experience. You have no experience. There's a really wonderful way they describe this process we go through in terms of in terms of becoming a Buddha. They say we start with what they call wrong view. This is about reality now, which is a similar idea. Let's say the wrong view. And here the wrong view, the analogy would be, let's say just the analogy would be a place called Melbourne. You live in America, you live in this county, there's no maps, there's no internet, there's no phones, just, you've never heard of Melbourne. And so the first instinct, because you're so used to living in Little Raleigh, North Carolina, maybe 100 years ago, let's say, and your world, we all know our world is very small when we're little. The first thing is, Melbourne, look on the map, there's no Melbourne. Nah, come on, don't be ridiculous, there's no Melbourne. You look up North Carolina map, No. So the first level is wrong view. Nah, not possible. Don't be ridiculous, not possible. But then you keep your mind open. Then you suddenly meet people who talk about this place called Melbourne. Oh, and you start to doubt. So now the next step is you go from wrong view to maybe there's a place called Melbourne, but you have doubt tending towards the wrong view. Then you go, no, not possible. But you keep your minds open. That's the crucial point. Then you go to the next step. And now you have doubt tending towards the right view. Because you keep checking. Not because you just like the sound of Melbourne, but you're doing your work. You're checking up. You suddenly ask people, have you heard of a place called Melbourne that's not in this little map? Yes. It's a place that is way out there, and you go across the ocean, and it's in the bottom part of the other half, down the bottom of the world, and it's called in Australia. Wow, I've never heard of that. And you start hearing people, so you get more confidence. Not based on that you like the idea, but that you're hearing it. This gets you now, you start looking at maps and you're really getting confident, and now you have what they call right belief. So what you do now is you keep moving, keep studying, and then you look at maps and you hear about things. You do all the time, you do your analysis, you do your study. There's a simple example. And now you're so confident, you have inferential certainty. This is still theoretical. You can prove there's a Melbourne. Based on what you read, on history, on people's experiences, you can even lead someone to Melbourne. And then you finally get on the boat and you get there. That's the direct experience of Melbourne. And that's how you become a Buddha. It's one step at a time. And the theoretical level is profoundly important, like I'm saying, Because if there is a place called Melbourne, you have to prove it theoretically before you get there. You can't go to Melbourne if you haven't got a map. And a map is a theoretical presentation. So here you can't, if acupuncture is real, if it's a valid system, we think of spiritual as just like this random series of weird things that happen that aren't coherent and that aren't part of a big picture, but they're things you dig out of your own weird mind. That's how we are so superstitious about spiritual. It's very strange, So we think of acupuncture as like this mystical thing. You just touch this and go there, something magical will happen. That's called superstition, okay? So if acupuncture is a valid system, it has to be first coherent theoretically. Same here, same here, same here. This to me is logic, and that's up to us to find out. And of course, acupuncture has got its own internal logic. Geography has its internal logic. Buddhism has its internal logic. Christianity has his and its. The Australian Aboriginals have theirs. You can't use the logic of allopathic to squeeze into acupuncture. It doesn't work. It's another language. It's like that. So the same with cakes. Great, a bit different, but the same. I had to want it first. And that led me to the next step. Oh, I'm going home to Melbourne anyway. I'll ask my mum. So I'd check, and why not? I mean, I was sort of nice to my mum, but I wasn't that nice. I wasn't going to ask her to make me a cake if she was a lousy cake maker just to make her happy. I might have, but I didn't want to. I knew. I had done my research. I'd checked up. I had inferential certainty that my mother knew what she was saying. That's what we have to have with a teacher. You check up. You look at the Dalai Lama. He's a good example because he's a big guy who's known around the world. He's got hundreds of books. So you check his books. Because what else do we have to read? We can't meet Buddha. He's dead. We can't read Sanskrit, we can't read Pali, we can't read Tibetan. What do we have to rely on? The people in the last 50 years in the West who speak English, who have looked at His Holiness, and we only go through these steps. What else can we do? You can look at him, you can check him out, go to his teaching. That's not enough. He's very charismatic. Well, so was Hitler. I mean, I'm serious. I never forget, I saw that amazing movie, by that German woman, Riefenstahl or somebody. But she destroyed her career, even though she was a genius technician, and she really was radical in finding new ways to make documentaries in the 30s, but she destroyed her reputation because she did this movie about Hitler. But you watch these movies, it's beyond fascination, These millions of Germans for whom he was basically a guru. It was really fascinating to watch. And then you hear his words. If you use any intelligence, if you're not emotionally connected to him, you hear his words, and he was an idiot, a complete silly man, a silly person. He had some good ideas and wasn't totally stupid all the time, but really irrational. But if you're attached to him, like people who are attached to Mr. Trump, I'm not saying he's even a monster. I'm not even saying that. But the people who are completely attached to any person, attachment only sees the good things. I know there's a group of Christians I read about, some certain level of those evangelicals, a particular group, who absolutely believe he's a special gift from God. They do not care what he does. They don't think it matters because he's going to save whatever it is they want to be saved, So, I mean, you have these views, and whatever Mr. Trump does doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Another woman's just accused him of, in fact, raping him, in a shop in Bergdorf Goodman back 50 years ago. So it's fake news, he said, whatever. But it doesn't seem to touch him. So the point is, when people adored Hitler, all you see is the good things. So that's not a valid reason. And because we think spiritual is all emotional, oh, wow, I went to this teaching, wow, he's so amazing, he's so charismatic, wow, the amazing Dalai Lama, and you're in tears. That is not enough as a basis for thinking he's a good person. I'm sorry. That is not enough. Check his words. Read the words, please. Go beyond the emotion. I'm happy you like him. It's really great. It's not enough basis. It's not enough basis. Equally, when you go to Lama Zopa's teachings, he's famous for teaching until midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Well, believe me, at 1 o'clock when my knees are killing me and I'm exhausted, I do not think he's a holy being. Do you understand? So if we follow our emotions, we're just being bizarre and absurd and childish. We've got to go beyond that and read Lama Zopa's words. So I happen to be editing his books. So then I can see, then I can prove. Same with the Dalai Lama. You calm your emotions down, get rid of the tears, you read his books, you read Lama Zopa, you get rid of your annoyance, you read their words, and you're going to see. There's the real stuff in the instructions. You get past your emotions, look at Hitler, read his words, he's ridiculous. That's how you check. That's how you check. And then you read some of the basic sutras. I mean, sutras are so bizarre you can't understand them anyway, so you've got to rely on the commentaries over the centuries. If you're going to read a bit of Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, all these people, if you can, All we can do is rely upon the humans over the centuries who've been embodying and accomplishing Buddhahood, who've written the things down. We have no other way to check, do we? We can't check on the Buddha. He's dead. So we have to do our research and have some confidence. Go to places like this. Listen to people like this. Me, for example, coming along. You know, you've never heard anything before. You might like, you might not like. But you've got to check on this place to see if it's a valid place, for example. This is just common sense. We do this about absolutely anything. Even just a shop we go to buy cake, we've got to check how many likes it's had, you know. This is how we do everything. This is how we do everything. It's common sense. It's common sense, and it's exactly the correct approach. And then gradually you start to listen, then you decide to practice, you commit, and then gradually you connect with certain humans. And then you eventually make a decision. You've checked on a person and you decide you're your teacher. Then you follow. And you can have many teachers. We clearly have to have many teachers, you know. So the necessity is obvious. It's just obvious. Obvious. It's completely obvious. So enough about that one. So now you start the work. Next step. Now a teacher, and Tsongkhapa takes this little preliminary practice to prime our minds to get ready to practice the essence of junior school, which is to abide by the laws of karma, which we're getting to. So we prime our minds. The next one is a teacher gets us to think about, and this is based upon the assumption of mind coming from the past and going to the future, which is embedded in the Tibetan minds, which we've touched upon now as a theory. So the next step is to want us to even enter into the path. We've got to be energized. So then one of the things is, then we should check up, our teacher gets us to think about how fortunate we are. This is kind of boring for us, you know, but we do this type of analysis. You go online, you're going to get people who say we're part of the 1.1%. Not rich, but fortunate. Only so many percentage of people have computers. Only so many people have education. Only so many people have this and that. That's exactly what the analysis on perfect human rebirth is. Exactly the same. A teacher gets us to think about how fortunate, if you compare with the rest of humans, we are like the 0.1%. 0.1%, whatever. Look at us. I mean, the fact that we can be in this room even wanting to be a better person, not even sure if we're Buddhist or Mickey Mousist, it doesn't matter, but the very fact that we're driven to want to understand things and even want to be a better person. This is not being arrogant. Look at the suffering of the human planet. Lama Zopa says, and you analyze it, it's not being arrogant, I think it's true, includes us. The vast majority of all humans on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind, Tibetan's point here, plays any role at all in their lives. This sounds pretty shocking, but that's the depth of our ignorance, the depth of our unawakenedness, the depth of our unawareness. We just float through life, crossing our fingers, hoping for happiness and dreading suffering, and then blaming everybody else when it comes. This is the nightmare of the world. That's the humans. That's only 1% of the universe. Humans are like 0.0000001% of the universe. We're not even discussing the animals and the other things, which we're going to get to when we get to karma. So we start to do the analysis and realize, oh my God, how fortunate I am. I've got this incredible life. I've won the lottery, got a human birth, got good conditions, reasonable sanity, reasonable health, reasonable money, enough to be able to spend a day on something like this without having to work 18 hours a day to get a bowl of rice. This is not joking. This is real. It opens our mind and we go, wow, I'm fortunate. So what's the action point? There's an action point at each point. Don't waste it. Because it's impermanent. This is implied here too. Don't waste it. So now what do you do? Now you enter into junior school. You enter into grade 1 junior school entry level. And now the next teaching, it's all priming our minds ready to practice abiding by the laws of karma. A teacher's priming us using these different Buddhist teachings. It's psychological. The next step is we enter into junior school and now we start to listen to Buddhist teachings about impermanence. So this is one of the first teachings the Buddha gave. It's extraordinary. The literature on it is marvelous. It's a fascinating idea. And there's got gross impermanence and there's an even more exciting, more interesting, subtle impermanence. It's really fascinating. It's the main meditation of the Theravadan practitioners, subtle impermanence. And we can confuse it for emptiness. It's so fascinating. It's so subtle. It's so marvelous. Powerful. It's like the way the scientists are talking about. It really is. It's very fascinating. But a teacher doesn't worry about the subtle one. That's interesting. Intellectually interesting. He gets us to get the gross one. And he doesn't get us to think about how impermanence of cups and toilets and microphones. He gets us to look at the impermanence of me. And that's called death. He gets us right between the eyeballs. And what's he doing here? Like with perfect human rebirth, he wants to get us a wake-up call. First we think how precious this life is. Now we're going to see how fragile it is. So there's 3 points here, 3 bullet points. The first 2 are the ones that we do the analysis, and the third is the action point. There's always an action point. This is the type of the way that teachings are presented, as an experiential to do something. And he's priming our mind. His agenda is to give us a wake-up call, to continue our wake-up call. First, this life is precious. Now, oh my God, it's so fragile. So, how do we think about impermanence here? First point, we analyze, we think about, we contemplate, meditate upon how death is definite. So we go, yeah, I know that, Buddha. I want something more clever, please. No, he says, you don't know it, haven't got a clue. If we look at our experience, as Lama Tsongkhapa puts it, we have this one of the profound delusions in our mind. And this is touching upon, what's the gentleman in the green shirt? Your question. This is touching upon your point. What's your name? Dan. Thank you, Dan. About human emotions. We're going to get to the way the Buddhists understand the mind. That's coming in a minute, but I'll imply it here. The Buddha's general view about the mind is it covers intellect, it covers human emotions, as you put it, it covers instinct, intuition, subtle, subconscious, unconscious, the entire spectrum of our inner experiences, from the most intense emotions to the most profound, brilliant intellect, to the most deluded, neurotic things, to the instinct, intuition. All of that is covered by the word mind. All of that is covered by the word mind, and the point is the Buddha is saying every one of those emotions, every one of those, whatever that's intellect or emotion or even instinct, they're all part of the cognitive process, and the emotional ones are just the emotional ones are the kind of like the dressing on top of elaborate conceptual stories deep in our bones. So everything comes down to being conceptual stories, and it's all the process of cognition that we have to learn to cut through the misconceptions and the wrong, anyway, I'll go into that later, so I'm getting complicated. So here, why we think, oh yeah, death is definite, I know that. But if we look at our lives, we can see we instinctively, primordially, as the Lama Tsongkhapa puts it, have this primordial belief in a permanent me. It's the Buddha's saying it's one of the big misconceptions deep in our bones from practicing it for countless lives. It's one of the many misconceptions. And it's got a massive emotional component. We don't even analyze it like that. We don't even articulate it that way. We know intellectually we're going to die. But the Buddha's saying because of this grasping at permanent me deep in our bones, which is a deep misconception, the cause of so much suffering, because we can't stand the thought of not being me, we kind of put this gross, concrete, solid view on top of this sense of me, which is a complete nonsense that we've made up. So here, a very simple, humble way to counteract that misconception is to look very simply at the world. You do it in meditation, you use different experiences and things you know to prove to yourself that death really is definite. So, you do an analysis that everything that comes into life will die. And you do all this. You can have an analysis to logically disprove it. This is one of the type of analytical meditations we talk about. We're using logic to argue with ego's misconceptions deep in our bones. You've got to start somewhere at the intellectual level. And then in daily life, you can really practice it. You look around, you just suddenly notice, oh, look, that ant died. And you go, that just proves it. Death's definite. That ant came into being, it's now dead. Instead of just going, oh, there's a dead ant. So, when you see all the world, oh, there's dead people. There's a war over there, because we're sort of bombarded by it. We don't get so we use this one point to analyze. My God, look at that. Death is definite. Everywhere you turn, you prove this point. Death is definite. You start to get real. Well, death is definite. If it's definite out there, guess what? My death is definite. Because it won't be a wake-up call until it comes to me. So there's the outside world which doesn't touch us, the ants and the dogs and the people that we're not even interested in. Then it gets closer to home and our friends and family start to die. It becomes more real. We start to see that death is definite, but we still don't get the point until we say, that will be me. That's when the wake-up call comes. That's the real learning. That will be me. Then we begin to get the shock. Because we have this hubris. As Lama Tsongkhapa says, we divide the world into living people and dying people. And guess what category we think we're in, unless we've been told we're dying. We're in the living category. And there's this arrogance, this hubris. I'm a living person. We really believe it as a valid label. And what we mean by living person is a person who's got a life ahead of them. And this gets us to the second point. This should scare the life out of us. That the time of death is absolutely not definite. That's when you start to really look at the world too. You know, you really use the analysis to really see how we have these absurd misconceptions deep in our bones because we can't stand the thought of not being me, because we grasp like vampires, you know. These are the misconceptions deep in our bones at emotional levels. So now you realize death, the time of death is not certain. So when you start to realize you think you're a living person, which means you've got a life ahead of you, it's completely bizarre. As Lama Zopa says, living people die before dying people every day. So it's completely conceptually made up. We know logically, if we think of it scientifically, even though we still can't bear it, we sort of think it doesn't really true. We know logically, scientifically, that people die, fetuses die, even that one alone. A fetus began being a human at the time of conception. But I bet you if we did surveys, and not surveys, but analysis, research, or what do we call it? Surveys. If we did, so we don't do these kind of surveys, check on the number of mothers who had an abortion or a miscarriage, or even the women who didn't even know they were pregnant. I bet you'd have more humans who get a human birth, who won the lottery, in terms of karma, we'll talk about that, who got a human mummy, who then die in the womb before they're even born. I bet you're going to find more of them than those who are born who then die. I wouldn't be surprised. Then the time of death is absolutely not definite. But we believe it is. When I'm a living person, I have a life ahead of me. We believe it. We see it every day, like on a long journey, and there's life ahead of me, and we never see the end, and we don't want to see the end. No way, it's kind of there. So all these little logics you've got to use to smash these absurd misconceptions. So that one, you think about a journey. Like, where are we now? We're Raleigh, okay, and I go home. All these years I've been here, I never remember the route because I don't watch, because people always drive me, I always forget the route. Never mind. When I used to drive Robbie's truck, I'd always get lost, So anyway, we know this kind of experience, that you start from here, and you've got we have a sense of time. We've developed a sense of time. So maybe it's about 10 minutes to Robbie's if the traffic's good, 8 minutes or something. So as you move away from the centre, you have a feeling of moving away from where you came from and getting closer to the goal. We have that feeling. It's very vivid. If you live an hour away, if I fly to Australia, it's the same. I know how many hours, I know what it feels like, I know what I can do in that period, so you're sensing it, because we've got a sense of it. We're always moving towards something. We know that, and we have a very real view of it. But think about death. We I'm going to die sometime in the future, And so you feel safe, because we're near it. Not me. No, not me, not me. And then you think, so for me, the really powerful example of this one is when you think that death is definite, but with no fixed date. Even when you're on death row, my friend's on death row, if you want to think of anybody who's got a definite death date, that's them. But my friend Frank, who was getting ready for his death date, did all his appeals, he knew he had about 10 years to go, that's how they think. Naturally, because on appeals it lasts 2 more years. Oh, phew, I've got 2 more years, That's okay, on the taxpayers' money, that's why death row is so stupid. It costs billions and billions of dollars, and no Americans mind paying for that. But they're not happy to pay for free health to keep people alive, It's kind of weird. Do you understand my point? It's so irrational. It's so irrational. But we're happy to pay for death row. But keeping them alive, all the lawyers. This is what's so, I'm just getting off the topic now. But if you're like in Singapore, they have death row, but there's no appeal. So you die in a month. So it's very cheap, it's much more efficient, and it works. Do you understand? But here, 30 years minimum, you stay on death row. Who do you think's keeping you? They're all poor. I've never met a rich person on death row, I promise. Do you understand? I'm allowed to talk this way. I'm an American. I am an American. I told you, I've been an American since 2006. Anyway, back to the topic. It's about death. So my friend Frank, he was getting ready, but then leukemia got him in a month and he was dead. So death is not definite. Even on death row, death is not definite. I mean, it's very hilarious, but it's kind of we get caught out in our silliness. These are the misconceptions. Buddha says across the board, our minds have got layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of these misconceptions, and at the level of deep emotions, so embedded. So we've got to argue with them, step by step, rip them out of the mind. Even my friend, I always feel bad telling this because she's my dearest friend in the world, was married, and they were Buddhists, and he was young, he got this virulent cancer. He'd be dead in 2 months. They'd been divorced. She went back to live with him to help him die, doing his practices. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. He became a living person again. So she had to leave him again. He didn't die. Are you hearing my point? Even death is not, even being a dying person can turn into a living person. It shows how silly we are. We believe in these labels. A dying person. You think of a person who you hear is dying. You don't want to talk to a dying person. You talk about them in hushed tones. You're embarrassed. You feel bad. Ask people who have got chronic illnesses or sickness like cancer. It's horrible to have people talk to you. It's best to keep it secret, I'd say, because people treat you like some kind of weird person. You don't exist. You haven't got a life because you're called a dying person. It's absurd. I remember years ago reading in Time magazine, 30 years ago, some fellow got MS, which kills you slowly. And he was a CEO of some big company. He said, no reason to tell anybody. They thought, I better tell my board. They fired him in a month. Who wants a dying person running a company, you know? I mean, it shows how absurd we are. These are the misconceptions deep in our mind. So we have to contradict them, starting intellectually. So catch it every time. Look at the world. That little ant, busy getting its grain of sugar, boom, dead. Big surprise. It didn't think it was going to die, but it too has a feeling of impermanence, impermanence grasping. It's in all the minds of all beings. So you argue with it. But the point has got to be the wake-up call is that will be me. Not just about everybody else. That's the arrogance. Oh, yeah, they die. I'm not going to die. I'm on this side. I'm living. No, you've got to go, that'll be me. And the best way to think, as Lama Zopa said, is I'm going to die today. This is hilarious. I say the word. I've been saying it for these years. I will die today. And you know what? I don't believe it. That's how deep this assumption is. That's how deep these delusions are. That's why when we know how deep these delusions are, Buddha says they're eons old, we can have some humility and patience with ourselves and know that the theory is good and we have to chip away tiny pieces by tiny pieces. To get a realization of impermanence is already so sublime you can't believe it. And this is junior school, entry level, grade 1. So have some humility, please. It takes time. Don't beat yourself up. It's bizarre. We've got to all the time use this analysis. All we're doing here is using Buddha's analysis of the world to interpret the world. That's all we're trying to do here. So you see everything through the lenses of impermanence, you'll learn a lot about the world and you'll change your view. When you have impermanence, that means you'll give up expecting things to last, you'll give up expecting the relationship to last, you'll have more awareness, you'll be more flexible, you'll let go of things easily. Not just about death. Death is the most radical, so it can give us a wake-up call on everything. It's profound. And this is not a thing, this is the point about Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy. He didn't make it up. He's not a creator. This is reality. This is natural law. Everybody knows impermanence. It's not as if it's religious, not religious even. But here the wake-up call is the point, the action point, and that's the third one. Given that my consciousness goes back and back and back, given that my consciousness goes forward, 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 and now given karma, which is coming later, but this is the assumption in this point because it's a given in the Tibetan and the Buddhist countries, given that every millisecond of what I think and do and say will sow seeds that will ripen in the future as my experiences. And then more specifically, given that everything I do that's called negative will ripen in the future as my suffering, and given that every millisecond of what I think and do and say that's virtuous will ripen in the future as my happiness, and finally, given that I do want happiness and don't want suffering, logical conclusion, it follows I better give up deluded actions now. Give up. So that's the wake-up call. That's the wake-up call from this. Start to, realize reality and stop wasting my life. Because everything it will carry on with me. So I've got to start changing myself right now. So now that's not even yet beginning the real practice, but that's the wake-up call. And we go to the next point, which is the next wake-up call, which is the one that's most bizarre for us. And again, a karma is assumed here, even though we don't go to learn about it till the next point. Because that's that worldview in Asia. The next one has always been the most hilarious ones. Given that a negative seed could ripen as my future suffering, and I don't know when I'm going to die, and so then given that I don't know when I'm going to die, and I know I don't want suffering, I'd better stop immediately sowing seeds that will cause a suffering rebirth when I die. That's the action point here, quite precise. But this is so this is where, like, when Lama Zopa first started teaching Lamrim back in the 70s, he was renowned when he started going to the classical Lamrim. So then you get to this point, and he will then describe in the text all the different types of realms that are the likely possibilities of types of suffering: animal birth, spirit birth, and hell beings. And he'd concentrate on the worst ones, the hells. So I mean, his 1 month courses, they're famous for being three of the 4 weeks, the details of the various hell realms. So these poor hippies coming along looking for liberation and drugs, I mean, were absolutely mind-boggled, freaked out. Could not believe this insanity that they were hearing from the mouth of this seemingly very holy, funny, wonderful person. It was like insane. Lama Zopa now will say the word hell and crack a joke and change the subject. That's it. Because that's the classic texts. That's like you going to your doctor and she warns you, sweetheart, you know, you might get cancer. And you go, well, what's cancer? And she'll show you movies of people with hideous cancerous lungs, and you will freak out and you'll go, thank you for showing me. Oh my God, I don't want that. I'm going to stop suffering. I'm going to stop smoking. It's exactly the same here. But because we think of it as punishment, do you understand my point? We think of it as someone punishing me with that. Then that's why we have complete hysterical mental breakdowns. Are we communicating here? But this happens to be the Buddhist worldview. Most Buddhists don't even talk about karma. Forget about lower realms. I'm happy to talk about them. They might or might not exist. It's part of the worldview. It fits in terms of this model. I'm happy to talk about it, you know. We're big people. It seems that we're grown-ups, hopefully. So briefly here, the classic Lamrim point, the next step is, given that I could die at any moment, and I don't want suffering, that's a fact we can all prove. As to whether you want to conceptualize idea of being a hell being and a spirit or an animal, that's the freak out for us. It's kind of hilarious, you know. But we can conceptualize possibility being born a human again, and we can still look at suffering. So let's look at that one first. 10 minutes before lunch. So let's look at that one. That's manageable for our poor minds, you know. If we can even imagine having another life, even if we can imagine getting another human life, then we also can see within human life one way that suffering manifests is in a human life, not just in a lower realm. Let's look at that one first, so it's more manageable for our poor minds. So have a look at the world. Look at your own suffering. Do you like being harmed? Do you like being lied to? Do you like being stolen from? Do you like being cheated upon? Do you like people not believing your words? Do you like people not giving you credit? Do you like people not giving you things? Do you like people... all these things. Look at our life. We know we don't like that. We haven't gone to the details yet. The details are coming. But this is assumed because that's the view, you know, in this world, that world, the Asian world. We'll go into the details in a minute. We know we don't want that. We absolutely know with certainty, in the same way we know we don't want cancer. So that causes us to do what? Stop the cause. You don't want to get fat? Stop the cause. You don't want to have people, you know, you don't want the physical ones we get. Emotional, we've got this whole world of different rules, you know. We're so emotional about all that and neurotic. We're very intelligent when it comes to physical things. We are intelligent, we are grown up, we're accountable, we know we watch our diet, we know we watch the cigarettes, we know we watch the alcohol. Why? Because I don't want suffering. But when it comes to the mind, we're like babies. We see it as punishment. We do that. It's like pathetic, you know. Buddha's view, it's the same. You cause what you become, mentally as well as physically. That's the Buddha's view. That is manageable. So at least you know you don't want to be lied to. Then now this gets us, when we realize that are going to be the consequences, now we go, when we see the doctor's thing, we now go, we're sort of leaping a bit to the same point. Whom can I turn to? Well, that's the doctor. Please give me methods, doctor. Please explain to me how to stop smoking. Please explain so you can tell me more about cancer, so I get more fear, so intelligent fear. So please tell me how to stop smoking. Please tell me how to eat well so I don't get diabetes. That's exactly here. Next step, whom do we turn to? Whom can I turn to give me methods to stop suffering? I don't want suffering. I'm fed up to here with suffering. So we turn to the doctor. And we're talking Buddha here. So that's up to us to choose the doctor. You can choose Jesus if you want his method. You can choose, whoever you like if you want their method. It's up to you. You can make up your own method. I don't care. Here we're talking Buddha. That's the next one. Refuge. You take refuge. You rely upon the Buddha. That's where you learn all about that one. We'll go into it. We'll go into these things. Roughly, briefly. Then what will Buddha do? He will now give you the methods. He'll now give you the medicine. That's where you now abide by the laws of karma. That's the discussion we want to start talking. That's the method. That's the essence of all junior school. All these points I've just said. Teacher, perfect human rebirth, death and impermanence, lower realms, suffering in general, the doctor. Now it culminates in the essence of junior school, which is now let's do the job. Let's do the work. Abide by the laws of karma. Live an ethical life, because that's the medicine. That's the cause of not having future suffering. That's the logic of it. Are we communicating here? Got 5 minutes. So I'll give you a summary of karma, so you can talk about something at lunchtime, because I want you to discuss it at lunchtime. So basically, we'll go into more details after lunch. Then we'll get to junior school, where we get to the mind after lunch, okay, too. And tomorrow can be compassion and whatever, maybe more of the wisdom wing as well. So, okay. The essence of karma. Karma means action. And every millisecond of what we think and do and say for the Buddha is an action. And the main action is mental action. The mind is the boss. The mind runs the show. Essentially, for this view, there's no action if the mind's not involved. The feet and the hands don't do actions on their own. The feet and the hands, the body and the speech and the hands have to be driven by the mind. So intention, volition is the meaning of the word karma. Everything, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. So without the intention, we will not do or say anything. But the shocking part is, everything we do and say is driven by intention, but it's so embedded, it's so programmed, it's so instinctive from countless lives of practicing that we don't even notice as intention, where it's just completely mindless. So we have to unpack that and become mindful, literally, and begin to be in charge. And this is massive, because intention is so primordial. It's beyond, intention sounds so rational. I will. But the hand and the speech will do nothing without the mind telling it what to do. But we don't realize, we don't see it. We're not in charge of the process. We're like mad, we're like insane. We have to become in charge of the process, which is why this very first level of practice is control the body and control the speech, control the servants of the mind. This is unbelievably powerful level of practice, but it sounds boring to us. Live an ethical life. Yeah, okay. I want to look at my mind. I want to meditate, please. Well, that's a joke. That's high school. You cannot possibly begin. Look at some crazy kid. You talk about your child, You say, sit down and meditate, please, and control your mind. What a complete joke. I was 31 when I met the Dharma. I heard about sitting down and watching your breath. I knew it was the dumbest method for me at that point. I didn't even pretend to try. Not because I'm arrogant, I am arrogant, but because I just knew it was not the method for me. My mind was, I'm such a busy person, such a speedy person. And many of us can be this way. We have to know the methods that work for us. Some people, absolutely, it's the perfect method from day one to get you to begin to see your mind. But I knew it was not, would have been made, I couldn't. There's no point in trying. And that we've got to be that's why I point yesterday, we've got to be so intelligent and know the kind of person we are. That's why you try and get some kid who's wild. A friend of mine is a lovely guy, a Buddhist. He's got this kid who's really wild, so he gets him to vacuum the floor. At least he's doing what Daddy says, so he's doing a good job. So he puts all his energy into the vacuum cleaner. How intelligent! Instead of trying to tell him to be quiet, shut up, and don't talk, and control yourself. It's not fair to a child with berserk energy. It's not fair. You see my point? It's irrational to tell a wild child to calm down. Excuse me. Give it an action to put its energy into. That's what I knew I needed. And I'm still doing that. Channeling my energy into useful activities. Meanwhile, seeing my mind as well. One day I'll be ready for meditation, maybe next life. I'm serious. Do you get my point? Getting samadhi. You understand? Are we communicating here? Yes. We're so kind of ridiculous when it comes to Buddhism. So fanatic and absurd, We've got to know what we're meaning. I'm not going against being mindful. It's fundamental Buddhist teaching. It's incredible. It's amazing. And even that's why the walking one is so marvelous. You channel your energy into the walking. But why not channel your energy into speedy walking as well? It's up to what you do with your mind. You get my point? Really, we've got to know your own mind, You've got to know your own mind. So we can assume most people back then in India didn't have such an insane environment, which we're fed into and born with these crazy minds. We've all got a million more thoughts than people back at the time of the Buddha, so it suited more then. We're all kind of crazy and bipolar right now. I mean, so we've got to all know ourselves with a happy mind and find a method to channel it to also see your mind. Are you with me, people? Yes. So important, this one. So the Buddha's saying, every millisecond what we think first and then do and say, sow seeds in the mind that will ripen in the future. That's it. More specifically, every millisecond what we think and do and say that's labelled negative will ripen as suffering. Every millisecond of what we do that's called positive will ripen as happiness. That's the fundamental principle. The whole of Buddhism can be seen as a path of stopping suffering and getting happiness. And that's rooted in the concept of a negative and positive state of mind and action. And again, even this is a shock for us, because modern psychology doesn't like to use words like that. It sounds like we're judging somebody. But Buddha's got such specific definitions of these terms, and we need to understand them intelligently. And when we do, this is the fundamental basis of then learning to have ethical behavior. So Buddha helps us first by starting with three little things of the body and 4 little things of the speech. And he gets us the last 3 of this first 10, this little checklist of 10 don'ts. The last 3 are the beginnings of working on our minds, So the first 3 are don't kill, and he suggests all sentient beings. Don't take the ungiven. That's the Tibetan translation of stealing. It's a beautiful term. And don't lie. That's speech, sorry. Don't misuse our body based on sexual attachment, is the way of spelling it out. Don't cheat on partners. Don't rape, as His Holiness puts it, There's lots of other things in the literature as well, but they're the basic ones. Don't misuse your body to harm others. And what are those actions? They're driven by anger or they're driven by attachment. The 2 of the main neuroses, breaking it right down. The next 3 are speech, and this is very, very fascinating for us. So tell me about lunch. That's getting done out there, isn't it? Who's preparing lunch out there?
It's bring our own lunch.
So you bring your bags out. So you can wait 10 more minutes. You don't mind? You're okay to wait 15 more minutes? It can be a bit of meat on the bone so you can discuss karma before you have your lunch. Yeah. You're not fainting from hunger yet? No. Okay, good. Okay, that's great. Okay. Oh, good. So speech, we could spend the rest of the day talking about speech. I find it phenomenal. I've been hearing it again for all these years, but it's only really now I'm really seeing the power of speech, And especially for us, most of us don't go around raping and killing too many people, I would suggest. We don't steal too many things. Really and truly, isn't it? We don't steal and abuse and cheat on partners and rape. I would suggest they're the more violent actions, aren't they, of the body. I think we don't do those mostly. But look at our speech, people. I think we just don't pay attention to speech. We don't think it matters in our culture. And when we say, I can say what I like, this is so profound. We say, I can say what I like. What we mean is, I'm allowed to sow any seed I like in my garden. Well, yes, you are. But guess what? They're all going to bear fruits, so you better be damn careful which ones you sow. But we don't have that concept of cause and effect. We have no concept that our speech, for example, will bring consequences. To whom? To me. It'll sow seeds in my garden. We don't have that view in our culture at all, because we have the view of judgment and reward. If someone sees me do something naughty, then I'll get punished. But we think we're free. I'm allowed to say what I like. Yes, you are, but they'll bring consequences, and that's the piece that we miss. We don't even get that one. So what is the speech then? Well, one misconduct of speech. And all these are in relation to harming others. There's other kinds of speech and other kinds of actions that have nothing to do with harming others, but they harm us. But these are the ones that harm others and also harm us. These are the heavier ones. So speech necessarily is harming others. Well, not always. You'll see my point in a minute. So we have speech, we have lies. Now that's really, we can see, we think we can say whatever we like. We make up things. We don't think we're even lying. We speculate half the time. And that's not really called lying, because lying is conscious. But we speculate all the time because we're so intelligent, we're so clever, we're so educated, we have so much information, and we're all happy to give answers. So we say something with such confidence, but really not knowing we're saying the right thing. That's not lying technically because you don't intend to lie, but you mislead people. And you look into going to the internet, you drown in confusion. People lie to you, they cheat you, they're manipulating you to get in here, to get there, to do this and do that. You can't trust anything. It's just beyond like a nightmare. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because it's all speech, it's all expressions of speech. Words are expressions of speech. And they're just vomiting forth in our culture. Vomiting, unceasingly. And there's no value in most of those words. I mean, no wonder we get depressed and sad. They just vomit, utter vomit. It's not being mean to people. Because we think it all doesn't matter. We think speech doesn't matter. But it's unbearable. And that's why when you think about what the Buddha says, the power of speech, that's Buddha's main gift. And if you think of your life, speech is unbelievably important. So, okay, I'll finish the 4. Lying, harsh speech, abusing people. Rabbiting on about nothing. That's our favourite. We just go blah. Whether anybody wants to hear, I don't care. It's my right to talk, you know. Meaningless, just meaningless rubbish, essenceless rubbish, nonsense. And then the 4th one, which is also one of our favourites, is saying bad things about people when they're not there. Bad-mouthing when the person's not there. That's our most favourite because we feel most safe doing it. Our family, our colleagues at work, politicians. We think it's virtuous to rave on about how evil Mr. Trump is or evil whoever we think is evil. What we don't realise is, forget all this speech harming whoever hears it, but what we don't realise is this is destroying us. Even now, forget future karma. The consequence karmically, the future consequence karmically of saying things that aren't true is that people won't believe my words. The consequence of just rabbiting on about nothing is that people won't value my words. The consequence of harsh speech is that even when you're speaking nicely in the future, people think you're being abusive. The consequence of bad-mouthing behind backs is that people are going to be bad-mouthing about you and never trust anybody. You live in paranoia. You look at the world now. This is all the consequence of speech, of harsh speech, of wrong speech, of bad speech, of lying speech. It's unbearable. We see the world now. We know that we're telling the truth. People don't believe us. We go mad. It's because of past lying. People don't believe our words. Or no, people don't value our words. This is the most nightmarish. You're at work, you've got all the best ideas, and just people, oh yeah, this is the female one often. It can be everybody, but it's a typical karma of being female, that we're seen as less. Or, in a white culture, you're seen as, you're the minority, that kind of thing. This is how it is. The world is like this. Your words don't have value. You can be the best, most intelligent person, but if you don't fit the cultural view and the karmic view of who's important, you are nothing. Being seen as low, that's the result of pride. Now we're talking about the mind now. Everything we experience now, it's like a living example of the results of our own past negative speech, and indeed our own past negative actions, and even our own past negative thoughts. But we're looking at speech right now. So the thing about speech too, forget the future results, but look at this. Let's say you're home all day on your own. No one's hearing you. You're not harming anybody else. But look at your uncontrolled. Let's say you're looking at the news, you read your iPad, you're shouting and yelling because you like to talk out loud. We all talk out loud to ourselves. Look at all your harsh speech, loud shouting, yelling, this Richard, this blah, blah, that. How do you think you feel by the end of the day? You're exhausted. Of course, you blame all the stuff you're reading about. No, it's your own speech. It's so obvious, We don't get it. We just don't get it. So we destroy ourselves daily. And our speech and our actions of the body, they're just uncontrolled. And this is where because we hear it as punitive, we hear it as moralistic, we hear it as you're going to get punished. We think, I'm going to do what I like, I'm going to say what I like. That's not the point. That's kind of childish. Of course you can. But the Buddhist point is, sweetheart, of course you can eat what you like. I'm going to eat what I like after living in a restricted mummy, Yes, you will, but it's going to bring consequences. That's Buddha's simple point about karma. So when we get that, we become accountable. We don't hear someone else telling us what to do. We know it's our own self who's in charge. This is the point. This is the shift. This is the view of karma. And this takes time, Are we communicating? I always quote my family. It wasn't as if we're saints or anything. There was a whole bunch of us, 7 of us, six girls and a boy. Mother had 7 girls and a boy, but one of them died. I always joke that she started when she was 33 and she stopped when she was 43. She had 8 children in 9 years, I think. I mean, she was really and teaching music in between and running the family business because my father was hopeless, you know, so she was amazing. She was very amazing, my darling mummy. And she died of exhaustion at the age of 71. So anyway, whatever, she was wonderful. I love my mother. So anyway, the point I'm saying here is, I'll lose my own track, I'm so stupid, that in our family, because we're all so close and we're all very volatile, all like me, all speak too fast and act too fast and run around being bossy. We've all got bossy personalities, every one of us in our own way. My brother's the most quiet. He's the last one. He came at the end. I remember the day he got born. It was during one of those, you know those radio programs we used to have? Like one of them was called, I think we used to have the American ones, and one was called When a Girl Marries. I don't know, maybe we got the third-rate American ones, I don't know, like on the television the same. But when I was in the 50s, and one of the American ones was When a Girl Marries. I remember my grandma would listen to all these radio shows. I remember all of them, you know. And so one of them was called Dad and Dave, this absurd, hilarious Australian show. Well, Tony, my brother, was born during Dad and Dave. 7:15 on a Sunday. I remember it vividly. We got the phone call from the hospital. There were 7 children. We all cheered. The whole neighbourhood cheered. My father kind of like went demented. You know, he finally got a son. I remember that, you know, he had 7 daughters, finally got a son, you know. Anyway, whatever. But the 7 of us, so we're all kind of, because we're close in age, we're all old together now, you know. I'm 74, Janet's 75, and Tony's 65. So there's like this 10-year period, so we're all old together. It's very convenient, you know, and we're still all alive. And we're friends. So we used to fight at house. We didn't have enough beds, you know. When Mummy had so many babies so quickly, we ran out of beds because we were poor, because she sent us to the fanciest Catholic convent. I joke that she still owes the bills, you know. We all got the best education. My mother was so amazing. So anyway, the point is, we're always locked together. We had to share beds, we had to rotate. She was a lousy housekeeper. Clothes were up to there on the floor. We didn't know how to take care of anything. We had potties because the toilet was outside. It would get spilt. It was like chaos in our family, you know. Years and years and years later, from our fancy convent, one of the girls who lived in the rich suburbs, I always felt so guilty going to their houses. When I'd go to their houses, I thought I was in a hospital. It was all so clean, you know. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wait to get home to our messy house. But I always felt ashamed about our house because we'd draw all over the walls and everything, you know. So one of these fancy girls, 50 years later at one of our school, not uprisings, what do you call them? School reunions, not an uprising, sorry. At one of the school reunions, one of these girls, Penny, said, "Oh, Robina, we loved going to your home. You were so bohemian." we just thought we were dirty, you know. We were so ashamed of our house. And anyway, never mind. So the point is, we'd always fight. Of course you would. You're on top of each other, all these volatile children, you know. I mean, kids should have their own bedrooms. Each parent should give time to each one. With 7, I don't know how it's possible. But how we expect, because your children, you put them all together. This is one of the most insane ideas I've ever heard. Because all I remember is just nightmares, shouting, yelling, you know, just trying to get air. And you don't know what you want. You want space, but you don't know it, you know. So anyway, the point is we all used to fight. Of course we did. And then we would make up because we love each other. Then when we all grew up and went our own ways, and we'd come back for Christmas, because Christmas is our Thanksgiving, and we'd fight. Of course we would, but we'd love each other again. But it's hurtful. Yeah, and then when you talk on the phone, Polly says this about Julia, says about Marius, says about Janet, says about Robina. We all talked about each other. Everyone does it, and this creates so much pain. We know that, you know. You remember it. You're holding this hurt. You get my point. And luckily, we've never had a schism in families, and it's really common in families. So at some point, all I can say is maybe the last 20 years, because most of my sisters have all given up being Catholics. One of them's a lawyer now. She used to be a chiropractor. Now she's a lawyer. She found her purpose in life when she was 55. She's now 65 or something. And she's now trying to, it's awful. It's good. It's good. She's supporting all the victims of the pedophiles, the Catholics. So she's determined to expose them. She's on the television. She's at the United Nations. She said, "I've found my life, you know, found my purpose in life." She was a bit old, but she's happy about it. Doing an amazing job. And I mean, just not one goes to mass anymore. They're all very but good people, ethical, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, help people. They're wonderful. I adore my family. But the key point I'm getting at is this. We've got this unspoken agreement now that we do not say bad things about each other to each other, and we all talk. I use FaceTime. We all talk to each other, you know. We do not do that. It's like you can feel it in the air, but we do not say it. And we used to all the time. And we do not talk things between each other that we don't agree with. So in other words, we don't fight. So all I can say is it's really astonishing, but the harmony that's grown and the sweetness between us, and we even praise each other now to each other. Do you understand? But as for me, I'm making the point about speech. It's beyond unbelievable. And this is just body and speech before we get anywhere near working on our minds. So it really has incredible meaning. It's got incredible benefit. But the point here is, it's the preliminary work we have to do to calm our energies so we can begin to really learn to meditate, to begin to control our mind. It's just logical, you understand? So it has great meaning. When we just hear, oh, don't kill, don't lie, oh yeah, I've heard that before. It's got incredible meaning for ourselves. Do you understand? I mean, my biggest one in my life, I mightn't punch and kick and yell. I mean, I mightn't punch and kick, but I yell. I mean, you can hear me yelling. Hopefully I'm using my speech to yell good things now, instead of abuse, you know. But people still hear me as abusive, I tell you. I mean, what can I do? Unless I speak like that all the time, slowly. I don't know. I'd probably send you all to sleep, talking like that at this pace, quietly, all the time. Would you prefer that? I would take 6 weeks to say what I say in the weekend, so it would never work. I couldn't do it. I'd go mad. I'd burst. Unbelievable. But I know one time with Lama Yeshe, you know, because always my speech has been my problem. So it comes out the mouth. I'm so fast, you know. Out the mouth is done, you know, because I can be very sharp and think I'm so clever and point out mistakes all the time. As a kid as well. So all I know is Lama Yeshe one time, when I moaned about how pathetic I was to her, I was feeling all self-pity. And it was just amazing. Lama just would say one word, it would be like a beam of light from heaven. It was always so powerful for me. He said, there's nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behaviour. Do you understand? And that was a revelation for me. I used to think, oh, I'm bad. No, Robina, you're fine. It's just your ridiculous behaviour. Control your speech, please. It was very powerful for my mind. It was a revelation, actually. Anyway, blah, blah. So that'll do. 12:15. Food for thought, okay? So if you're going to have your lunch together, have a happy time. Talk about the football, whatever's on. Talk about the politicians, whatever you like. I don't care. But try and make at least 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes at the time focused discussion on specific points. Don't just rave on about what you read in the books last week, on what we have heard today. This is like cooking class. We've got a few recipes we've discussed. Talk about these precisely, and then bring back questions. That makes it really useful time together. Can you do that for me? All right, sweethearts. Let's think of our lunch differently. All Buddha wants to do is see everything differently. So think of your lunch, and you might have brought a carrot or an olive or a bread and a piece of butter. Think of it differently. And this is in emptiness. It has no inherent, think of this, in meditation. It does not have any inherent nature. It looks like a carrot and bread and butter, and we believe it's carrot and bread and butter from its own side. It is not, Buddha says. Biggest mistake of all. We're getting to the biggest mistake. It is not. It has no intrinsic nature. We give it meaning. The meaning it has for us is what we've given it. It doesn't come from the bread. We give it that meaning. This is emptiness. So we then think of it just dissolving. And we imagine all of our food together in a big skull in the sky, and we bless it with the energy of the enlightened beings, body, speech, and mind. Om Mahong, Om Mahong, Om Mahong. This is a quick bit from Vajrayana. And now we have this transcendental blissful nectar as big as the universe. So the most marvelous thing to do is to offer it. So we think, as Lama Zopa says, so we think all the gurus, all the Buddhas, all the holy beings, all the bodhisattvas, and all the suffering sentient beings of all the realms of existence, pervading space. And we think we would happily offer it to every one of them. If we could, we would. And then finally, we visualize them experiencing the joy of receiving this delicious nectar, which is giving them everything they want, thinking like this. Lama Sanghi Lama Che, Dejan Lama Gedunte, Kongi Jepo Lama Te, Lama Namla Che Pabu. So those, like 1 minute of thoughts, that's thoughts. We just had concepts. Those thoughts, we've transformed our action, which would normally be motivated by attachment. So now we're thinking, we've given all this to billions of sentient beings, it's most extraordinary thoughts, and we've sown the seeds for that generosity. So now, as Lama Zopa says, now please enjoy it. And the bigger your stomach, the better. Okay? I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.